But on to Iran. Richard, let's talk about Senator Chuck Schumer. His future as the next leader of the Senate. Democrats could be in jeopardy, some say, because of his opposition to the Iran nuclear deal. Politico is reporting that Schumer's camp believes the White House leaked on Thursday night that he was going to vote against the deal. Former senior advisor to President Obama, David Axelrod, tweeted, quote, "Schumer made a decision based on politics, not fact." The source claims that the only person Schumer told was President Obama, and that the senator asked him to keep it quiet until Friday. And White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest refused to say Democrats should still support Schumer as Harry Reid's successor. Take a look.
This is a question for Democratic senators, and this is a vote that they will cast in early 2017. But I certainly wouldn't be surprised if there are individual members of the Senate Democratic Caucus that will consider the voting record of those who say they would like to lead the caucus.
So I guess the question is this a real threat to his ascension to leadership? But also, you saw the White House, you could call this scrambling, or maybe this was part of the plan. They had a huge list of nuclear scientists come out in support of the deal over the weekend.
Look, I don't think my views on science are really worth talking about, and I'm not sure necessarily the political views of scientists are all that significant. Look, the Schumer thing is interesting. The White House has been trying to delegitimize opposition to the Iran agreement. The president's speech at American University was just that, and I find it offensive. There are legitimate grounds for having real concerns about this agreement. The president said this is an easy call. No way. No, this is a tough call.
We talked about this in Washington, where this president actually compared Republicans to the hardliners in Iran chanting death to America, and said that he keeps saying, Richard, this is such an easy call to make. You have Angus King, who came out actually in support, saying it was the single toughest decision he has ever made. And the vilification of Chuck Schumer over the weekend, and I would say this, even if he came out on the other side of the bill, deeply, deeply offensive. Suggesting that a call this close for people who have supported not only Israel, but the defense of this nation, and legitimately believe that it puts this nation at risk and our allies at risk, to delegitimize them this way is pretty stunning.
It's over the top. I'd say two things. Well, this president gave the greatest speech, I would think, of his presidency at Charleston 6 weeks. And then 6 weeks later, I think he gave the smallest speech of his presidency at American University. And it's been an interesting time. Second of all, even if people like Schumer come out against the agreement in the first moment, it doesn't mean it's over. I can imagine then the president vetoes, Right. Then there's a chance for the negotiations with the Senate to begin. And it's quite possible the White House could then come forward with certain ideas that would even make it possible for people who voted against it the first time around to vote for it.
They're not thinking that way. But they're shoving everybody into a corner.
And I'm not even sure it needs to go that far. And Chuck announced he was going to vote against it. I think the White House's unhappiness was as much, maybe not as much, but was partly the timing of the announcement, that it was earlier than they expected. They wanted it closer to the actual vote so that they would potentially have less influence. And I don't think that Chuck intends to use every bit of his influence and power or whatever to try to bring along other votes. And so when you do the math, the White House can afford to lose a few Democrats. This was the one that was going to, for obvious reasons, going to be hardest to keep. So I'm not sure it changes the ultimate trajectory of this process.
Just to be clear, the president doesn't think it's a close call. He's not pretending on on that.
No, he doesn't.
He thinks it's an obvious vote.
Which makes it even more frightening.
No, let me push back on that, please.
He can't see how other people think.
The opponents still need an enormous percentage of the remaining undecided Democrats in the Senate and in the House.
But getting beyond the politics, even if this thing does come into effect, this is going to be a major national security challenge for decades to deal not just with Iran and its future nuclear capability, but the nuclear programs of several of its neighbors. This is now front and center for not just this president, not just his successor, but his successor.